Hi, Dr. Connie. Good to see you again.
Keila.
Welcome, everyone, to Shadow Work to Expand Awareness, where both Dr. Connie and I explore the impact of inner work on the outer world and the gifts of shadow work for everyone. So, today we're going to be exploring the hidden shadows of our work lives and in our work spaces. I think work has become more than what we do for many of us. It's become who we are. And there's so many cases of our identities being attached into our careers and what we do for a living. And the workplace is a space where we're actively trying to provide value and resolve issues. And we're receiving validation or getting criticism. So in a way, I see it as an adult playground for our shadow to come out and tease or poke at us. So Dr. Connie, you've spent decades exploring the shadow in all forms. And with work, we witness in workaholism, burnout epiphanies, switching roles, dealing with leaving old identities and creating new ones, burnout, retirement. But a lot of these are behavioral. So, what does the inner world of shadow work look like at work? What's really going on in that space?
The inner world of work. What a good question. I would guess that some of our listeners haven't thought about this because work is really, it can be very consuming and very externally oriented. It keeps our attention outside of ourselves, which is one of the reasons it can have these health consequences because we're not paying attention to the inner world as we work. So, many of us are raised in families where either one or both parents are very ambitious. They may need money and be driven by that. They may need to be seen and to feel successful and get their value from that. And so they transmit those priorities to us as kids. And then we grow up and we transmit those priorities to our kids. And so we end up with this workaholic consumer culture that we see all around us, which now has some threats to it in terms of unemployment and automation and AI and all of that. But in the general mainstream culture, those have been the values that have been transmitted for a few generations now. And I think with shadow work, we want to ask the question, if that's what's being expressed, what's being repressed? What's being buried in the shadow as a result of those values and priorities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a valid, really valid question to sit and reflect with.
Yeah, anyone who's listening might want to reflect on what is being buried in the shadow as you pursue your career or your academic life or your job, whatever it is that you're doing. And, for some people, relationships are sacrificed. Traditionally, when men were the sole providers, they didn't get much time with their families, right? That's changed now much more since women are in the workplace. But now women may miss time with their kids as well. And part of what happens in the work culture is that there isn't a lot of space for being vulnerable, for feeling your feelings, for shadow awareness, for empathy. And so all of those qualities start to be sacrificed.
Yeah. When you're so present with your work and with your tasks and everything that comes with those responsibilities, then you stop being present with the things that truly, truly matter in your life and with the people, the relationships, or the things and hobbies that you like to do outside of work. So I feel like presence with blank could be a response for a lot of people here in terms of what's being repressed. And it keeps
Spirituality.
saying,
Spirituality might be lost. Creativity might be sacrificed, right? Particular parts of our personality are going to get lost in
yeah,
the workplace. So why? Let's talk about why that happens. You and I have talked about how the shadow forms and that there are family shadows as well, that each family has a persona that they present to the world, right? This is a good traditional Christian family, or this is a, progressive liberal family, or this is a rich, privileged, elite family, right? Whatever the persona is.
a mask we wear to fit in.
Right. And to get approval and to get respect. And then, so each family then has shadow. What is being hidden, right? Secrets behind the curtain. Well, it turns out that corporate cultures do the same thing. Even small businesses may do the same thing. There's a certain presentation, a public mask, and then behind that, there's shadow material. And so as people try to fit in with their work performance or their pay scale or their competition, it leads them to bury other qualities. And the company itself has a shadow that's, like, for example, the obvious one, the oil companies are destroying the planet, right? But every company has some kind of shadow content that it's creating as it goes through its business. And the individuals who are a part of it are also sacrificing or burying or repressing certain shadow content as part of the group. And, often our families support this, right? Especially families that need money and need your salary. They'll support your participating in something that may not be ethical or moral, that may not be contributing value, but may be causing harm. And so that's one of the ways in which business shadow might show up.
And I mean, it's hard to be picky once you have a career and you're developing in a role, and then you start to spot the shadows. And I mean, there's a way to work in that where you're not sacrificing completely these important aspects of who you are. And I think one really good way to practice that is just setting your own personal boundaries in the workplace as well. Depending on your personality, this can come easily or be hard for people. If you're a people pleaser, you might want to stay up until 11 p.m. and continue messaging and trying to create PDFs and just getting lost in that sauce. But I've experienced working with people who were respectfully setting their own boundaries and saying, I'm having dinner with my family at this time. Or, you could witness that as an example of someone who has their own space and time and who's putting in energy into their own, aspects of their life where they're nourishing their own values. So, a lot of it is setting boundaries because you can't escape it all, but you can work within it and be mindful of
Yeah,
energy.
yeah, that's a good example of self-care while remaining in the workplace so that your health isn't what's sacrificed.
Mhm.
Your mental health and your physical health, right? So if
Yeah.
you set boundaries and you take care of yourself while respecting the needs of the workplace, so for some people that's not possible. They're too they're in a situation where their survival is at stake and they're threatened by the CEO or the leader. So there are, corporate or small business owners who are really controlling and have an inner tyrant, kind of, right? And won't tolerate those kind of boundaries. So then the question becomes, are you fully choosing to be there in this workplace? And are you choosing the consequences? And what does this mean for your psychology and for your well-being? Now, if they can speak up and make boundaries, then maybe their tight work persona can kind of loosen up a bit. And they can begin to practice being more authentic and expressing their needs. And sometimes they might get a yes, okay. And sometimes they might get a no, I need you here tonight, right? So what's inside of this? Because we started out talking about the inner world of work. What's inside of that behavior? Often people project a parent onto their boss, right? So they're attributing to their boss a certain authority, power, knowledge, success. And at the same time, the boss is projecting onto the employee inferiority and a subordinate person, or an incompetent person, or an extraneous person, if it's a really negative projection, right? And so you can see how a family dynamic with a controlling parent might be replayed in the inner world, and the employee feels really helpless and gets silenced and can't speak up to set a boundary because it's too intimidating. So part of this is about shadow awareness. See if you can tune in to what you're saying to yourself when this is happening, and what you're feeling, and where your body is tightening. And who's the shadow character in that situation where you can't set a boundary? And your boss says you need to stay all night and do this project. Who is showing up? Who's the shadow character who comes up in you? Is it the little child who needs the love and approval of your boss? And if so, what does that mean? Is that an appropriate place for the little child to get love and approval? Is that realistic? Will it ever happen?
Yeah.
But that child may be scared of abandonment and getting fired. Or, it may be that the employee is seeing some kind of ethical violation in the boss. He's secretly stealing money, or he's secretly cheating another customer or a federal agency or something. Then what does that employee do? Does he become a whistleblower and speak up? Who is the shadow character that's coming up there that's blocking him from speaking up and telling the truth? Or is he consciously choosing, no, I need this job. I can't reveal that. Right? So asking yourself to kind of move from the behavioral world into the inner world isn't easy. It's complicated. And it's rich in terms of the workplace. It can be really rich. And it can lead you in all kinds of surprising directions. Right? Whether you stay at your work or go someplace else.
Yeah, that's really fascinating how you brought up how we might be trying to earn love again, but this time through performance or recognition. And then when we don't get it in the workplace, we feel those same old wounds as we felt as a child, like rejection or invisibility or not enoughness. So there is a separation between the inner world and what needs to be resolved there so it doesn't show up in the outer world in our behaviors and interactions.
Exactly. And the leader, the CEO, the president is also experiencing shadow characters, right? She might feel because she's a woman, she has to be more aggressive
Mhm.
and more controlling to show her competence,
Yeah.
right? And she becomes, tyrannical and controlling with her employees. So she needs to stop and take a breath and say, what shadow character is showing up here?
Mhm.
What is this power shadow about? What does this character really need? This shadow character, this inner tyrant. What does she really need by treating people this way? Because she sees the consequences. Nobody likes her. Everybody's afraid of her, right? So, whatever level you're in the workplace, your inner world is really important. You bring it with you wherever you go, right? And there are tools, there are practices that you can use to express yourself more fully, express your doubts or vulnerabilities or fears in the workplace, and see what happens. Just kind of put a toe in the water and test your authenticity and see what happens. And then use self observation to see what shadow character comes up. Oh my God, I'm going to be abandoned. Oh my God, I'm going to be broke and living on the street. There's
Mhm.
a fear of homelessness in our culture now. It's epidemic
Yeah.
because we see people on the street every day. So it's terrifying for people to speak up to power.
One of the ways I s- actually started my shadow work journey in depth was when I started my first job. And it was for a tech company, a creative tech company. And I think for me, it was more of the sacrifice of soul. And I had that fear throughout the months. After starting my job, I started off like at a peak high expectations. This was really fulfilling. This is the right path. And then over time, I started just becoming so drained and doubting my own competency as just someone starting off in the workplace and being the youngest in my team, and noticing that some of the work I was doing was not fulfilling, and there was just a lack of that fulfillment of the outcome. Then I started noticing how I felt after calls and after meetings with my boss, and it was all telling me there's a lot of inner work to do. And I had to ask myself that same question of what am I sacrificing here? What is not being met? Um, because then it started showing up in the work I was doing, in the conversations I was having. And over 6 months, I got to the point where I just felt like a skeleton of myself or a shell of myself, and I needed to bring in more authenticity into that space. So I was like, okay, I have nothing to lose now. If I want to quit, I'll quit in a couple of months. But let me just try. Like, let me try to flip the script and change here. So I tried bringing more of my authentic self and understanding who that was before starting the work and bringing her back into this space. And I started experiencing more fulfillment and talking to people with more authenticity and less expectation. So when I just dropped the expectation of what I wanted out of this workplace and the role, then ironically, I started bringing in more of those qualities that I was looking for before. So you
Isn't
really
that
need to pay
interesting?
attention. Yeah, you need to pay attention to what does cause you stress and what you can release rather than hang on to. So then the fulfillment you seek swings your way.
What you're saying kind of resonates about relationships.
Hmm.
People get into relationship and they play a role. I'm going to give him what he wants. She's going to like me because I do this for her. It's a similar thing where the persona is leading, and then little by little, the authentic voice starts to come up,
Yeah.
and you can create intimacy in a relationship. And that's really what you're describing, how you drop the role or the persona and you began to explore something more real
Mm-hmm.
and find more satisfaction. And I think, most people are not doing that in the workplace. They're focused on the outer world and not paying attention as you were to your feelings, to your thoughts, to your body's reactions, to your anxieties, to your doubts, your vulnerabilities, right? We're not taught this. I mean, it's okay, people who are listening, if you're not doing that, because nobody teaches us to do it. But Keila and I are suggesting that you can really enrich your experience if you practice attuning to your inner world at work and noticing, as you did, why aren't I fulfilled here? Why isn't this meeting the expectations I had? What could I do differently by staying in this job or by leaving? They're hard questions. It's not easy if you feel like your survival is at stake. It's not easy.
Right. Yeah. But it starts with observing that work persona and noticing
Right,
what fears are there connected around authenticity,
right,
expressing your true values.
right. And what are the consequences for you if you don't do that?
Mm-hmm.
The short and long-term consequences if you don't do that. If you stay at work as an obedient child in the shadow or a yes man, right?
Yeah.
Or a competitive sibling with all your coworkers, and you recreate your family dynamic, then nothing's getting conscious and healed. And so when you can kind of stop and look at it and really tune in and check out what's happening, you can begin to observe it and not obey it. Okay, this obedient child is scared to speak up, but I don't like what's happening here. What will happen if I tell my boss that whatever, this customer is unethical, or this coworker is cheating, or I'm unhappy here because of XYZ. So that means wrestling with that shadow character that's stopping you from doing that.
Yeah. I'm seeing if we zoom out, it seems like shadow work in our careers is not necessarily about quitting or escaping the system where shadows do reside, but just becoming more conscious with it and observing the character that's running the show, finding out what it's protecting within, and then learning to meet those needs differently outside of the work and in the workplace that you do.
Well, I think it's an individual choice whether people leave the job or not, right? I think part of what we're saying is what you just said, that you can stay in the job and change it by changing your inner world
Mm-hmm.
and doing these practices. And for some people, that's not going to work.
Right.
For some people, they're going to face something intolerable,
Oh,
something they can't accept, right? Maybe they sacrificed a dream that's too big to give up in this job. Maybe they really want to study music and not finance, and they need to leave the world of finance to have an authentic life, or whatever it is. And this is true at different stages of life. At midlife, a lot of people have this crisis
yeah.
about their career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a certain point where I realized I was kind of living my father's unlived life. He had a dream for himself that he projected onto me that I was kind of living out.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to kind of excavate these shadows in your family of origin, you start to see, am I really living my one true life, my precious life
Mhm.
that's right for me?
Yeah. It's hard to even consider the possibility of that question, but it is important to know that there are infinite other possibilities that you can explore in life
Yeah,
and not confined or contained.
that's right.
I think the workplace does a really good job of vacuuming people up into that one reality, that one shared goal, that one community. Um, and you can stay stuck there
Mhm.
unless you choose to go against the grain, ask yourself the questions, and see if it's right for you to take a leap elsewhere. Because it's
That's right.
possible. The change is scary for a lot of people,
Yeah,
but it is possible and it could lead you to beautiful places.
yeah. This is not simple or easy, what we're suggesting, but it does offer a possibility of depth and richness for
Hmm.
your work life.
Yeah.
And, both of my books, Meeting the Shadow and Romancing the Shadow, both have sections on work and on the workplace and shadow work. So if people want to follow up, they can do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And also, if you've been in the workplace for a long time and you're transitioning careers or going into retirement, I recommend The Inner Work of Age.
Yeah, this is
Actually,
about transitioning away from work.
yeah,
Yeah.
recommended this to my dad after a phone call with
Oh,
us. He recently retired and he was sharing a dream with me about being at the airport and losing his luggage and searching for something in this airport. And there's a lot of symbolism there of, his purpose was so tied to his work, and now he's chasing something different, but losing those old identities or dropping them, like everything in the luggage that represents
right.
persona, everything that's closest to who you are. So, yeah, this is a great read if you are transitioning outside of the workplace and being called to explore something different.
Yeah, I love that dream. The airport is between worlds,
Yes,
isn't it?
that liminal space.
Yeah,
Going.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Losing his identity. And people have dreams like that at midlife too. There are these moments of transition. Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's important to follow that calling if it's calling you.
So post your responses for us in Substack so we can see what kind of work experiences you're having and whether you can apply shadow work in the workplace where you are and what it reveals for you.
Yeah, we want to hear how this is active in your lives, and I'm going to leave some prompts that you can ask yourself around this topic of the shadow in the workplace. And we'd love to see your responses in our community chat.
Thank you for listening. Thank you, Keila.
Thank you, Connie. Thanks, everyone.